Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Science Channel. Tonight we will journey through time, walking alongside creatures that once filled our world with wonder. Animals that roamed vast plains, soared through ancient skies, and swam in prehistoric seas. These beings are no longer with us, yet their stories remain, etched in stone and bone, waiting to be told. From the mighty dinosaurs to animals that vanished only centuries ago, each creature played its part in the grand tapestry of life. If you enjoy these quiet explorations, I invite you to like and subscribe or share a simple thought down in the comments. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is rest, settle in, and allow the stories of these ancient beings to carry you gently into sleep. Let's begin. The Age of Giants. Long before humans walked the earth, immense creatures ruled the land. The dinosaurs dominated for over 160 million years, a span of time so vast it is almost impossible to comprehend. They evolved into countless forms, from towering herbivores to fearsome predators, each adapted to their environment in remarkable ways. The world they inhabited was warmer, wetter, and filled with plants and landscapes we would barely recognize today. Ferns towered like trees, and the continents themselves were arranged differently, connected in ways that allowed these animals to spread across the globe. The dinosaurs were not a single type of creature, but a diverse family, as varied as the mammals that would come after them. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4. Some had feathers, others scales. They filled every ecological role, from the smallest insect eaters to the largest animals ever to walk on land. The name dinosaur means terrible lizard, though they were neither truly terrible nor lizards. The word was coined in the 1840s by a British scientist named Richard Owen, who recognized that certain fossilized bones belonged to a distinct group of ancient reptiles. These were not the sluggish, cold-blooded creatures once imagined, but active animals, many of which may have been warm-blooded, caring for their young and living in social groups. The more we learn about dinosaurs, the more complex and fascinating they become. They were not failures of evolution, but incredibly successful animals that adapted to changing climates and landscapes for an unimaginable span of time. Their reign ended not through weakness, but through catastrophe, a moment of cosmic bad luck that reset the course of life on Earth. Dinosaurs first appeared during the Triassic period, roughly 230 million years ago. The world then was a single supercontinent called Pangaea, a vast landmass surrounded by an equally vast ocean. The climate was hot and dry in the interior, with seasonal monsoons along the coasts. Early dinosaurs were relatively small, often no larger than a dog or turkey. They shared the land with many other reptiles, including the ancestors of crocodiles and the first mammals, which were tiny, shrew-like creatures that lived in the shadows. Over millions of years, dinosaurs diversified, growing larger and more specialized. By the Jurassic period, they had become the dominant land animals, filling niches from the ground to the treetops. The continents began to drift apart, creating isolated environments where different species evolved in unique ways. The Jurassic period, which lasted from about 201 million to 145 million years ago, was the golden age of dinosaurs. This was when the largest animals ever to walk the earth lived. Massive sauropods with long necks and tails stretched up to 100 feet in length, their bodies supported by pillar-like legs and hollow bones that reduced their weight. These gentle giants browsed on the treetops, stripping leaves and swallowing them whole, often ingesting stones to help grind the plant matter in their stomachs. The Jurassic world was lush and green, with forests of conifers, ferns, and cycads. The climate was warm and humid, with no ice at the poles. In the oceans, giant marine reptiles like ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs hunted fish and squid, while in the skies, pterosaurs glided on leathery wings, the first vertebrates to achieve powered flight. The Cretaceous period, from 145 million to 66 million years ago, saw even greater diversity among dinosaurs. Flowering plants appeared for the first time, transforming the landscape and providing new food sources. Herbivorous dinosaurs evolved specialized teeth and jaws to process these plants, while predators became faster and more cunning. This was the age of Tyrannosaurus rex, perhaps the most famous dinosaur of all, a massive predator with bone-crushing jaws and tiny, seemingly useless arms. But it was also the age of Triceratops, with its impressive frill and 3 horns, and the duck-billed hadrosaurs, which lived in vast herds and may have communicated through elaborate calls. By the end of the Cretaceous, dinosaurs had been the dominant land animals for over 150 million years, seemingly invincible in their mastery of the planet. The day the world changed. 66 million years ago, a catastrophe struck that would change the course of life on Earth forever. An asteroid roughly 6 miles wide slammed into what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The impact released energy equivalent to billions of atomic bombs, instantly vaporizing rock and creating a crater over 100 miles across. The explosion sent shockwaves around the globe, triggering earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and tsunamis that swept across coastlines. Debris was thrown into the atmosphere, along with soot from worldwide fires, blocking out the sun and plunging the planet into a dark, cold winter that lasted for years. Without sunlight, plants died, and the food chain collapsed from the bottom up. Herbivores starved, and the predators that depended on them soon followed. The extinction event did not happen instantly. Some dinosaurs may have survived for months or even years after the impact, struggling in a world that had become hostile and barren. But eventually, all non-avian dinosaurs perished. 3/4 of all species on Earth went extinct, including the giant marine reptiles and pterosaurs. Yet, life endured. Small mammals, some birds, and certain reptiles survived, along with many plants whose seeds lay dormant in the soil. The world that emerged from this catastrophe was quieter, emptier, but also full of opportunity. With the dinosaurs gone, mammals began to diversify, eventually giving rise to the incredible variety of species we see today, including ourselves. The asteroid impact was a moment of profound loss, but also a turning point that allowed new forms of life to flourish. Birds are the living descendants of dinosaurs. When we watch a sparrow hopping on a branch or a hawk soaring overhead, we are looking at creatures whose ancestors survived the mass extinction. Birds evolved from small, feathered dinosaurs called theropods during the Jurassic period, long before the asteroid struck. These early birds, like Archaeopteryx, had features of both dinosaurs and modern birds, with teeth, clawed wings, and long bony tails, but also feathers and the ability to fly. Over millions of years, they lost their teeth, their tails shortened, and their flight became more refined. When the asteroid hit, many bird lineages perished, along with their dinosaur cousins, but a few survived, likely because they were small, adaptable, and could find food in the devastated landscape. Today, there are over 10,000 species of birds, making them the most diverse group of land vertebrates. Every time you see a bird, you are witnessing a living link to the age of dinosaurs. Not all extinct animals disappeared millions of years ago. Some walked the earth alongside our ancestors, and a few vanished within recorded history, their loss documented by the very people who witnessed it. These more recent extinctions remind us that the story of life is ongoing, and that human actions have become a powerful force shaping which species survive and which do not. Over the past few centuries, countless animals have disappeared, often due to hunting, habitat destruction, or the introduction of invasive species. Each loss is a reminder of our responsibility to the natural world and the creatures with which we share this planet. Yet, even in these stories of loss, there is wonder. For these animals were remarkable in their own ways, adapted to their environments, and deserving of remembrance. The lost giants of the Ice Age. After the dinosaurs vanished, and millions of years passed, a new group of giants emerged. These were the mammals of the Ice Age, creatures adapted to a world of cold and ice that advanced and retreated in cycles. During the Pleistocene epoch, which began about 2.6 million years ago and ended roughly 11,700 years ago, massive ice sheets covered much of North America, Europe, and Asia. The climate was harsh, with long, frigid winters and short summers. Yet, life found ways to thrive. Enormous mammals roamed the frozen landscapes, including woolly mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and giant ground sloths. These animals were often much larger than their modern relatives, their size helping them retain heat and survive the cold. The woolly mammoth is perhaps the most iconic Ice Age animal. Standing up to 13 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing as much as 6 tons, these massive herbivores were covered in thick, shaggy fur that protected them from the freezing temperatures. Their long, curved tusks, which could grow up to 15 feet in length, were used to sweep away snow to reach the grasses and shrubs beneath. Mammoths lived in herds, traveling vast distances across the tundra in search of food. They were closely related to modern elephants, and their social structures were likely similar, with matriarchs leading family groups and caring for the young. Mammoths thrived for hundreds of thousands of years, but as the Ice Age ended and the climate warmed, their habitat shrank, forests replaced open grasslands, and hunting by early humans may have contributed to their decline. The last mammoths died out only about 4,000 years ago on a remote island in the Arctic, long after the pyramids of Egypt were built. Preserved mammoth remains have been found frozen in the permafrost of Siberia and Alaska, their flesh, fur, and even stomach contents intact after thousands of years. These discoveries have given scientists an incredible window into the lives of these animals. We know what they ate, the parasites they carried, and even details of their DNA. Some scientists have proposed using this genetic material to bring mammoths back through a process called de-extinction, inserting mammoth genes into the DNA of modern elephants, to create a hybrid animal that could survive in cold climates. Whether this is possible or ethical remains a subject of debate, but it speaks to the enduring fascination these creatures hold over our imagination. The woolly mammoth has become a symbol of the Ice Age, a reminder of a world that was colder, stranger, and filled with giants. The saber-toothed cat, often called Smilodon, was one of the most fearsome predators of the Ice Age. Unlike modern big cats, which kill by suffocating their prey with a throat bite, the saber-toothed cat used its long, curved canine teeth to deliver precise, stabbing wounds to the neck or belly of its victims. These teeth, which could grow up to 7 inches long, were both a powerful weapon and a vulnerability. If they struck bone, they could break, leaving the cat unable to hunt effectively. Smilodon had a robust build, with powerful forelimbs and shoulders that allowed it to wrestle large prey to the ground. It likely hunted animals like bison, horses, and young mammoths, often working in groups to bring down targets much larger than itself. Smilodon vanished around 10,000 years ago, as the large herbivores it depended on declined and the climate shifted. The giant ground sloth was another remarkable creature of the Ice Age, though it looked nothing like the small, tree-dwelling sloths we know today. These animals were enormous, with some species reaching the size of modern elephants, standing over 12 feet tall when rearing up on their hind legs. Despite their massive size, ground sloths were herbivores, using their powerful claws to pull down branches and strip leaves. They moved slowly, but their size and strength made them formidable, capable of defending themselves against even the largest predators. Ground sloths lived in a variety of habitats, from the plains of North America to the forests of South America, and some species even lived in caves, leaving behind massive claw marks on the walls. They disappeared around the same time as many other Ice Age megafauna, likely due to a combination of climate change and human hunting. The Irish elk, despite its name, was neither exclusively Irish nor technically an elk. It was a species of giant deer that lived across Europe and Asia during the Ice Age, and its most striking feature was its enormous antlers. These antlers could span up to 12 feet from tip to tip and weighed as much as 90 pounds, making them the largest antlers of any known deer species. Every year, males would shed these antlers and grow a new set, an incredible investment of energy and resources. The purpose of such massive antlers was likely to attract mates and intimidate rivals, a display of health and genetic fitness. However, as forests expanded at the end of the Ice Age, these enormous antlers may have become a hindrance, making it difficult for the animals to move through dense vegetation. The Irish elk went extinct about 7,600 years ago, one of many large mammals that could not adapt to the rapidly changing post-glacial world. The cave bear was a massive animal that lived in Europe and Asia, often sheltering in caves during the winter months, where they would hibernate. These bears were larger than modern grizzlies, with males weighing over 1,500 pounds. Despite their size and fearsome appearance, cave bears were primarily herbivorous, feeding on plants, roots, and berries, though they may have scavenged meat when available. Their skulls show adaptations for grinding plant material, with large, flat molars. Cave bears shared their world with early humans, who sometimes used the same caves for shelter, leading to occasional conflicts. Human artwork from tens of thousands of years ago sometimes depicts cave bears, suggesting they held a significant place in the imagination of our ancestors. Cave bears went extinct around 24,000 years ago, likely due to a combination of climate change and competition with humans for cave sites. The dire wolf was a fearsome predator of Ice Age North America, larger and more robust than the modern grey wolf. Dire wolves hunted in packs, taking down large herbivores like bison, horses, and ground sloths. Their skulls were more heavily built than those of modern wolves, with powerful jaws capable of crushing bone. Thousands of dire wolf fossils have been found in the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles, where animals became trapped in sticky asphalt and were preserved for thousands of years. These fossils have provided detailed insights into the biology and behavior of dire wolves, including evidence of injuries and diseases. Despite their success for hundreds of thousands of years, dire wolves vanished around 9,500 years ago, as the large prey animals they depended on declined and the climate warmed. Recent genetic studies have shown that dire wolves were not closely related to modern wolves, but were a separate lineage that evolved independently in the Americas, giants of the southern continents. While mammoths and saber-toothed cats roamed the northern lands, the southern continents had their own unique megafauna. In Australia, giant marsupials dominated the landscape. The largest of these was Diprotodon, a wombat relative the size of a rhinoceros. Weighing up to 2 tons, Diprotodon was a slow-moving herbivore that browsed on shrubs and grasses. It had strong legs and massive feet, leaving behind footprints that have been preserved in dried lake beds. Australia, during the Pleistocene, was a land of strange and wonderful creatures, many of which had evolved in isolation after the continent split from other land masses millions of years ago. Diprotodon shared its world with giant kangaroos that stood over 6 feet tall, carnivorous marsupial lions, and enormous flightless birds. Most of these animals disappeared between 40,000 and 50,000 years ago, shortly after humans first arrived in Australia, suggesting that hunting played a significant role in their extinction. The marsupial lion, thylacine, was one of the most unusual predators ever to evolve. It had a body like a big cat, with powerful forelimbs and retractable claws, but its skull was utterly unique. Instead of the long canine teeth typical of mammalian predators, thylacine had massive blade-like premolars that could slice through flesh and bone with incredible efficiency. Its bite force, relative to its size, may have been among the strongest of any mammal. Thylacine likely ambushed its prey, using its strength to pull down animals much larger than itself. Fossils have been found in caves, where these animals may have dragged their kills to feed in safety. The marsupial lion vanished around 30,000 years ago, another casualty of the late Pleistocene extinctions. South America had its own array of bizarre megafauna. Glyptodon was a massive armadillo relative, encased in a thick, bony shell that could weigh over 400 pounds. This shell was made of hundreds of interlocking plates, forming a dome that protected the animal from predators. Glyptodon also had a heavy, spiked tail that it could swing like a club in defense. These animals were herbivores, grazing on grasses and low vegetation. They lived in a variety of habitats, from grasslands to forests, and were common across much of South America. Glyptodon disappeared around 10,000 years ago, likely due to a combination of climate change and human hunting. Early humans may have used their shells as shelters, and fossils have been found with evidence of butchery marks. Megatherium was a giant ground sloth that lived in South America. Standing up to 20 feet tall when on its hind legs, it was one of the largest land mammals ever to exist, rivaling mammoths in size. Despite its bulk, Megatherium was a herbivore, using its long, curved claws to pull down tree branches and strip them of leaves. It had thick, powerful legs and a massive tail that helped support its weight when standing upright. Megatherium's size made it nearly immune to predation, and it may have been strong enough to fend off even the largest predators. These sloths lived in forests and open woodlands, and their fossils have been found with preserved skin and fur, giving us a detailed picture of what they looked like. Megatherium went extinct around 10,000 years ago, as the climate changed and human hunters spread across South America. The terror bird, Phorus rhacos, was a flightless predator that stood over 8 feet tall and had a massive, hooked beak capable of tearing flesh. These birds were the dominant predators of South America for millions of years, filling the ecological niche that large carnivorous mammals occupied on other continents. Terror birds had powerful legs that allowed them to run at high speeds, chasing down prey across open grasslands. Their wings were small and useless for flight, but may have been used for balance or display. Some species had bony knobs on their wings that could have been used as clubs in combat. Terror birds vanished around 2 million years ago, possibly due to competition with mammalian predators that migrated from North America when the continents connected. Madagascar, an island off the coast of Africa, was home to some of the strangest extinct animals. Elephant birds were massive, flightless birds that stood over 10 feet tall and weighed up to half a ton, making them among the heaviest birds ever to exist. They laid enormous eggs, some of which have been found intact, with volumes of over 2 gallons. Elephant birds were herbivores, feeding on fruits and vegetation in the island's forests. They had no natural predators until humans arrived around 2,000 years ago. Within a few centuries, elephant birds were driven to extinction, hunted for their meat and eggs, and their habitat destroyed by slash-and-burn agriculture. Their disappearance had a profound impact on Madagascar's ecosystem, as they were likely important seed dispersers for many native plants. The giant lemurs of Madagascar were primates that grew to the size of gorillas, a stark contrast to the small lemurs that survive today. The largest species, Archaeoindris, weighed over 350 pounds and likely moved slowly through the trees or on the ground, feeding on leaves. These lemurs had powerful jaws and teeth adapted for processing tough vegetation. They lived in a variety of habitats, from rainforests to dry woodlands. Like the elephant birds, giant lemurs disappeared shortly after humans arrived on Madagascar, victims of hunting and habitat loss. Their extinction represents a tragic loss of biodiversity, as these animals were found nowhere else in the world and played important roles in their ecosystems. Islands of lost creatures. Islands often harbor unique species found nowhere else, the result of millions of years of isolation. But this isolation also makes island animals particularly vulnerable to extinction. When new predators, competitors, or diseases arrive, island species often have no defenses and can disappear rapidly. Many of the most famous extinct animals lived on islands, and their stories are both fascinating and heartbreaking. The dodo is perhaps the most iconic extinct animal, a symbol of human-caused extinction. This large, flightless bird lived only on the island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. Standing about 3 feet tall and weighing up to 40 pounds, the dodo had a plump body, short legs, and a large, hooked beak. It evolved in an environment with no natural predators, so it lost the ability to fly and had no fear of approaching threats. When Dutch sailors arrived in the late 1500s, they found the dodo easy to catch and kill for food. The sailors also brought rats, pigs, and monkeys to the island, which ate the dodo's eggs and competed for food. Within less than a century of human contact, the dodo was extinct. The last confirmed sighting was in 1662. Today, very few physical remains of the dodo exist, but it lives on in popular culture as a cautionary tale of how quickly a species can vanish. The great auk was a large, flightless seabird that lived in the North Atlantic, from Canada to Scandinavia. Standing about 30 inches tall, it resembled a penguin, though the two were not closely related. Great auks were excellent swimmers, using their wings to propel themselves through the water in pursuit of fish. They came ashore only to breed, gathering in large colonies on rocky islands. For centuries, great auks were hunted by humans for their meat, eggs, and feathers. As their numbers dwindled, they became increasingly rare, and by the early 1800s, only a few isolated populations remained. The last known pair of great auks was killed in Iceland in 1844, and the species was declared extinct. Museums and collectors had driven the final hunt, eager to obtain specimens of a bird they knew was vanishing. The great auk's extinction was one of the first to be widely documented and mourned, sparking early conservation efforts. The moa were a group of large, flightless birds that lived in New Zealand. The largest species, the giant moa, stood over 12 feet tall and weighed up to 500 pounds, making them among the tallest birds ever to exist. Moa had no wings, not even vestigial ones, and their bodies were covered in hair like feathers. They were herbivores, feeding on a variety of plants, and they occupied a wide range of habitats, from forests to grasslands. Moa evolved in isolation for millions of years, with no mammalian predators to threaten them. Their only natural enemy was the Haast's eagle, a massive bird of prey with a wingspan of up to 10 feet. When the Maori people arrived in New Zealand around 700 years ago, they hunted moa extensively, using their meat for food and their bones for tools. Within a few centuries, all moa species were extinct. The disappearance of the moa also led to the extinction of the Haast's eagle, which depended on them for food. The Steller's sea cow was a massive marine mammal that lived in the cold waters around the Commander Islands in the Bering Sea. Related to modern manatees and dugongs, the Steller's sea cow grew up to 30 feet long and weighed as much as 10 tons. It had a thick layer of blubber to insulate against the frigid waters and fed on kelp and other marine vegetation, grazing in shallow coastal areas. These gentle giants were slow-moving and completely harmless, with no natural defenses. They were discovered by Europeans in 1741 when a Russian expedition, led by Vitus Bering, became shipwrecked on the islands. The crew survived by hunting the sea cows for food, and word of these abundant, easy-to-catch animals spread. Within just 27 years, the Steller's sea cow was hunted to extinction, the last individuals killed in 1768. It is one of the fastest documented extinctions, and we know relatively little about these animals, as only a few specimens were studied before they vanished. The Tasmanian tiger, or thylacine, was a carnivorous marsupial that lived in Tasmania, Australia, and New Guinea. It had the body of a dog, with distinctive stripes across its back and a stiff tail. Despite its common name, the thylacine was not related to tigers or dogs, but was the largest carnivorous marsupial of modern times. Thylacines hunted alone or in pairs, preying on small mammals and birds. They were shy and nocturnal, making them difficult to observe. When European settlers arrived in Tasmania in the early 1800s, they blamed thylacines for attacks on sheep, though the evidence suggests the animals posed little real threat to livestock. A bounty was placed on thylacines, and they were hunted relentlessly. By the early 1900s, they had become extremely rare. The last known thylacine died in captivity at the Hobart Zoo in 1936. Despite numerous alleged sightings over the decades, no confirmed evidence of surviving thylacines has ever been found. The loss of the thylacine is particularly tragic because it was entirely preventable, driven by human fear and misunderstanding rather than necessity. The vanished herds of North America. Before European colonization, North America teemed with vast herds of animals, some of which are now extinct or nearly so. The passenger pigeon, once numbered in the billions, forming flocks so large they darkened the sky for hours as they passed overhead. These birds were about 16 inches long, with blue-gray feathers and a reddish breast. They fed primarily on nuts and seeds, particularly acorns, and their migrations followed the seasonal availability of food. Passenger pigeons nested in enormous colonies, with millions of birds crowding into a single forest. The sheer weight of the birds would break branches, and the ground beneath the colonies would be covered in droppings several inches deep. These pigeons were incredibly social, relying on the presence of huge flocks for protection and successful breeding. When European settlers arrived, they hunted passenger pigeons for food and sport, often in massive numbers. The birds were easy to catch, and entire flocks could be netted or shot. As forests were cleared for agriculture, the pigeons' habitat shrank. By the late 1800s, their numbers had plummeted. The last wild passenger pigeon was shot in 1900, and the last captive bird, a female named Martha, died in the Cincinnati Zoo in 1914. The extinction of the passenger pigeon, once the most abundant bird in North America, is a stark reminder of how quickly human actions can drive a species to oblivion. The Carolina parakeet was the only parrot native to the eastern United States. These colorful birds, with their bright green bodies, yellow heads, and orange faces, lived in flocks in forests and swamps. They fed on seeds, fruits, and grain, and were often considered pests by farmers because they would raid crops. Carolina parakeets were shot in large numbers to protect agriculture, and they were also captured for the pet trade. Habitat destruction further reduced their numbers. The birds were highly social and would return to help injured flock members, a behavior that made them easy targets for hunters. By the early 1900s, they had become extremely rare. The last confirmed wild Carolina parakeet was killed in Florida in 1904, and the last captive bird died in the Cincinnati Zoo in 1918, just 4 years after the passenger pigeon. The loss of the Carolina parakeet is particularly poignant because it was a splash of tropical color in temperate forests, a reminder that even the most vibrant and seemingly resilient species can disappear. The lost world of the sea. The oceans have also seen their share of extinctions, though these are often less well known than those on land. The Steller's sea cow, mentioned earlier, was one example, but there are others. The Caribbean monk seal was once common throughout the Caribbean Sea and Gulf of Mexico, basking on beaches and rocky shores. These seals were hunted extensively by European explorers and settlers, who valued them for their oil and skins. They were also killed by fishermen, who saw them as competitors. By the early 1900s, Caribbean monk seals had become rare, and the last confirmed sighting was in 1952. The species was declared extinct in 2008. The loss of the Caribbean monk seal is significant because it was the only seal native to the Caribbean, and its disappearance has left a gap in the region's marine ecosystems. The sea mink was a large member of the weasel family that lived along the rocky coasts of New England and eastern Canada. It was larger than the closely related American mink, with a coarser, redder coat. Sea minks fed primarily on fish and shellfish, hunting in the intertidal zone. They were heavily hunted for their fur, which was highly prized. Unlike many other fur-bearing animals, sea minks did not seem to fear humans and could be approached easily, making them vulnerable. By the mid-1800s, they had been hunted to extinction. The last known sea mink was killed in Maine in the 1880s. Very few specimens exist in museums, and much about their biology and behavior remains unknown. The sea mink's extinction is a reminder that even animals that seem abundant can be quickly depleted by relentless exploitation. The giants that nearly vanished. Not all stories of extinct animals end in complete loss. Some species came perilously close to extinction, but were saved through conservation efforts. The American bison is one such example. Once numbering in the tens of millions, bison roamed the Great Plains in massive herds that stretched as far as the eye could see. They were central to the lives of many Native American tribes, providing food, clothing, and materials for shelter. When European settlers moved westward in the 1800s, they began slaughtering bison in enormous numbers, both for their hides and as a deliberate strategy to deprive Native Americans of their primary resource. By the late 1880s, fewer than 1,000 bison remained. A few individuals and organizations recognized the disaster unfolding and worked to protect the last survivors. Small herds were established in private ranches and newly created reserves. Slowly, the population recovered. Today, there are several 100,000 bison in North America, though most live in managed herds, rather than roaming freely as they once did. The near extinction of the bison is a powerful reminder of how quickly a species can be brought to the brink, but also of the possibility of recovery when people choose to act. The California condor faced a similar fate. These enormous vultures, with wingspans of nearly 10 feet, once soared over much of North America. By the 1980s, habitat loss, hunting, and poisoning from lead bullets in carrion had reduced their population to just 22 individuals. In a desperate effort to save the species, all remaining wild condors were captured and placed in a breeding program. Through careful management, the population slowly grew, and condors began to be released back into the wild in the 1990s. Today, there are over 500 California condors, split between captive and wild populations. Their recovery is far from complete, and they remain critically endangered, but they are no longer on the immediate brink of extinction. The story of the California condor shows that even when a species is reduced to a handful of individuals, recovery is possible with dedicated effort and resources. The black-footed ferret is another success story, though it too came dangerously close to extinction. These small carnivores depend almost entirely on prairie dogs for food and shelter, living in prairie dog burrows and hunting them at night. As prairie dog populations declined due to habitat loss and poisoning campaigns, black-footed ferrets declined as well. By the 1980s, they were thought to be extinct. Then, in 1981, a small population was discovered in Wyoming. 18 ferrets were captured to start a breeding program, and their descendants have been reintroduced to sites across the western United States. The recovery of the black-footed ferret is ongoing, with challenges including disease, habitat loss, and the continued decline of prairie dogs. But the species has been pulled back from the edge of extinction, offering hope for other endangered animals. Lessons from the lost. Each extinct animal has a story, and each story carries lessons for the present. The dinosaurs teach us about the power of sudden, catastrophic events and the resilience of life in the face of disaster. The Ice Age megafauna remind us that climate change has always shaped the course of evolution, and that even the most successful species can vanish when conditions shift. The more recent extinctions, driven by human actions, show us the consequences of overhunting, habitat destruction, and the introduction of invasive species. These losses are not just about individual species, but about the intricate web of life that connects all living things. When an animal goes extinct, it takes with it countless interactions with other species, roles in its ecosystem, and genetic diversity that can never be recovered. Yet, there is also reason for hope. The near extinction and recovery of species like the bison and California condor demonstrate that humans can choose to protect and restore. Conservation efforts around the world are working to prevent further extinctions and to preserve the incredible diversity of life on our planet. Protected areas, breeding programs, and legal protections have saved many species from the brink. There is still time to act, to learn from the mistakes of the past, and to ensure that the animals we share this world with have a future. As you rest here, imagine a world where mammoths still roam the Arctic, where passenger pigeons darken the skies, and where the forests ring with the calls of creatures we have only read about. Picture a time when the earth was wilder, stranger, and filled with an abundance of life we can barely imagine. These animals are gone, but their stories remain, carried in fossils, in myths, and in the memories of those who witnessed them. They remind us of what we have lost, but also of what we still have the chance to save. The night grows quiet, and the stories of these ancient beings settle around you like a soft blanket. Let them carry you gently into sleep, into a place where time stretches backward and forward, where the past and present meet, and where the wonder of life, in all its forms, continues to unfold. Rest now, and dream of the creatures that once walked this earth, their footsteps echoing through the ages. A reminder that every living thing has a story worth remembering. The age of reptiles, before the dinosaurs, Long before the dinosaurs rose to dominance, other reptiles ruled the Earth. During the Permian period, which lasted from about 299 million to 251 million years ago, the land was dominated by a group of animals called synapsids. These were not dinosaurs, nor were they mammals, but they were the ancestors of mammals, and some of them grew to impressive sizes. Dimetrodon is one of the most recognizable, with its distinctive sail on its back. This sail was formed by elongated vertebrae covered in skin and was likely used for temperature regulation, absorbing heat in the morning sun to warm the animal's body. Dimetrodon was a carnivore with sharp teeth and a powerful bite, preying on smaller reptiles and amphibians. Despite its fearsome appearance, Dimetrodon was not a dinosaur and lived tens of millions of years before the first dinosaurs appeared. The Permian period came to a catastrophic end with the most devastating mass extinction event in Earth's history. Around 251 million years ago, massive volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia released enormous quantities of lava and gases into the atmosphere. The eruptions lasted for hundreds of thousands of years, spewing carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and other toxic gases. The climate swung wildly, first warming dramatically and then experiencing periods of intense cold. Ocean chemistry changed, becoming more acidic and losing oxygen. On land and in the sea, life collapsed. It is estimated that up to 96% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species went extinct. Trilobites, which had survived for over 270 million years, finally disappeared. Entire ecosystems were wiped out, and it took millions of years for life to recover. The Permian extinction was far more severe than the event that killed the dinosaurs, and the world that emerged from it was fundamentally different. In the wake of the Permian extinction, new groups of reptiles evolved to fill the empty niches. During the Triassic period, before dinosaurs became dominant, other reptiles ruled. Phytosaurs looked remarkably like modern crocodiles, with long snouts filled with sharp teeth, and spent their time in rivers and lakes hunting fish. Rauisuchians were large, carnivorous reptiles that walked on all fours or on two legs, some growing to over 20 feet in length. These animals were the top predators of the Triassic, and early dinosaurs had to compete with them for resources. It was only after several of these groups went extinct in a smaller mass extinction event at the end of the Triassic that dinosaurs had the opportunity to diversify and dominate, the rulers of the ancient seas. While reptiles dominated the land, the oceans had their own array of fearsome predators. During the Mesozoic era, the age of dinosaurs, the seas were home to a variety of marine reptiles that have no modern equivalents. These were not dinosaurs but evolved from different lineages of reptiles that returned to the water. Ichthyosaurs were dolphin-shaped reptiles that were perfectly adapted to life in the open ocean. They had streamlined bodies, fins instead of legs, and large eyes that allowed them to see in the dim light of deep water. Some ichthyosaurs grew to enormous sizes, with one species, Shonisaurus, reaching lengths of over 60 feet. They were fast swimmers and active predators, feeding on fish and squid. Ichthyosaurs gave birth to live young in the water, and fossils have been found showing females with embryos inside them or in the act of giving birth. These animals thrived for over 150 million years before going extinct in the middle of the Cretaceous period, long before the asteroid impact. The reasons for their extinction are still debated, but it may have been due to changes in ocean ecosystems and competition with other marine predators. Plesiosaurs were another group of marine reptiles, and they came in two main forms. Some had long necks and small heads, using their necks to strike at fish like a snake. Others, called pliosaurs, had short necks and massive heads filled with teeth like daggers. These short-necked forms were among the most fearsome predators of the Mesozoic seas. Liopleurodon, a pliosaur from the Jurassic period, may have reached lengths of over 20 feet and had jaws strong enough to crush bone. These animals used their four flippers to swim, flying through the water much like modern sea turtles. Plesiosaurs were widespread, living in oceans around the world, and they survived until the end of the Cretaceous, disappearing in the same extinction event that killed the dinosaurs. Mosasaurs were the last great marine reptiles of the Mesozoic. They evolved relatively late, during the Cretaceous period, and quickly became the dominant predators of the seas. Mosasaurs were related to modern monitor lizards and snakes, and they had long, powerful bodies with paddle-like limbs and flattened tails that propelled them through the water. The largest species grew to over 50 feet in length. They had flexible jaws that allowed them to swallow large prey whole, and their teeth were sharp and recurved, perfect for gripping slippery fish and squid. Mosasaurs ate a wide variety of prey, including fish, sharks, sea turtles, and even other mosasaurs. They were so successful that they spread to every ocean on Earth. When the asteroid struck 66 million years ago, the mosasaurs disappeared, along with the dinosaurs and many other forms of life. The skies of the Mesozoic. While dinosaurs walked the land and marine reptiles swam the seas, the skies were dominated by pterosaurs, the first vertebrates to achieve powered flight. Pterosaurs were not dinosaurs, but a separate group of reptiles that evolved the ability to fly. Their wings were made of a membrane of skin and muscle that stretched from an elongated fourth finger to their hind legs and tail. This structure was very different from the wings of birds, which are supported by multiple fused bones and covered in feathers. The earliest pterosaurs appeared in the late Triassic period, over 220 million years ago. They were relatively small, with wingspans of just a few feet. These early forms had long tails and fully toothed jaws. They likely fed on insects and small animals, catching them in flight or snatching them from the ground. Over time, pterosaurs diversified into a wide range of forms. Some became specialized for life near water, feeding on fish like modern seabirds. Others became aerial hunters, catching flying insects or small terrestrial animals. The largest pterosaurs were among the largest flying animals ever to exist. Quetzalcoatlus, which lived during the late Cretaceous, had a wingspan of over 30 feet, comparable to a small airplane. When standing on the ground, it would have been as tall as a giraffe. How such a massive animal could fly is still a subject of research, but it likely used rising warm air currents to soar, much like modern vultures. Quetzalcoatlus probably fed on carrion or hunted small animals on the ground, using its long, toothless beak to probe for food. Despite their size, pterosaurs had hollow bones and were relatively lightweight, adaptations that made flight possible. Pterosaurs had other remarkable features. Many species had elaborate crests on their heads, which may have been used for display or to help with steering during flight. Some had thick coats of hair, like fibers called pycnofibers covering their bodies, which helped them retain heat. This suggests that pterosaurs, like dinosaurs, may have been warm-blooded or at least had metabolic rates higher than modern reptiles. Pterosaurs laid eggs, and fossils of pterosaur eggs and embryos have been found, showing that the young had well-developed wings even before hatching and may have been able to fly soon after birth. Pterosaurs thrived for over 150 million years, but they disappeared in the mass extinction at the end of the Cretaceous. By that time, birds had already evolved and were beginning to occupy many of the ecological niches that pterosaurs once held. The extinction of the pterosaurs left birds as the sole vertebrates capable of powered flight, a position they hold to this day. The megafauna of ancient South America. South America was a continent of giants during the Cenozoic era, the age of mammals that followed the extinction of the dinosaurs. Isolated from other continents for millions of years, South America developed its own unique fauna. Many of these animals were unlike anything living today. Toxodon was a massive, hippo-like mammal that lived during the Pleistocene. It weighed over a ton and had a barrel-shaped body with short legs. Despite its bulk, Toxodon was a herbivore, feeding on grasses and aquatic plants. It had large, ever-growing incisors that it used to crop vegetation. Toxodon was related to modern horses and rhinos, but belonged to a group of mammals found only in South America. It lived near rivers and lakes, where it could find abundant food and water. Toxodon went extinct around 10,000 years ago, likely due to a combination of climate change and hunting by early humans. Macrauchenia was an even stranger creature. It had the body of a llama or camel, but its head was completely different. Its nostrils were positioned on top of its skull, suggesting it may have had a short trunk like a tapir. Macrauchenia had long legs and may have been a fast runner, able to escape predators by sprinting across open plains. It was a herbivore, feeding on leaves and shrubs. Macrauchenia belonged to an extinct group of mammals called litopterns, which were unique to South America. Like Toxodon, it disappeared around 10,000 years ago as the Ice Age ended. Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat, also lived in South America, having migrated from North America when the two continents connected around 3 million years ago. South America was home to the largest species of Smilodon, Smilodon populator, which was even larger and more powerful than its northern relatives. It preyed on the massive herbivores that roamed the continent, using its strength and deadly canines to bring them down, the lost reptiles of the recent past. Not all extinct reptiles lived millions of years ago. Some disappeared much more recently, within the last few centuries, due to human actions. The Reunion giant tortoise lived on the island of Reunion in the Indian Ocean. These tortoises were large, slow-moving herbivores that had no natural predators and thrived in the island's forests and grasslands. When European sailors and settlers arrived in the 1600s, they hunted the tortoises for food. The animals were easy to catch, and they could survive for months without food or water, making them ideal provisions for long sea voyages. The tortoises were also threatened by habitat destruction and by the introduction of rats and pigs, which ate their eggs. By the early 1700s, the Reunion giant tortoise was extinct. Similar stories played out on many other islands around the world, where giant tortoises were hunted to extinction. The Galapagos Islands were once home to numerous species of giant tortoises, each adapted to the specific environment of their island. Some of these species have gone extinct, while others are critically endangered. Lonesome George, the last known individual of the Pinta Island tortoise subspecies, died in 2012, marking the end of his line. Efforts are underway to protect the remaining tortoise species and to restore populations through breeding programs, but the loss of unique subspecies represents a significant reduction in biodiversity. The Yangtze giant softshell turtle is one of the rarest animals on Earth, with only a few individuals known to exist. This enormous turtle, which can weigh over 200 pounds, once lived in rivers and lakes across China and Vietnam. Habitat destruction, pollution, and hunting have driven it to the brink of extinction. Conservationists are working desperately to breed the remaining individuals, but time is running out. The loss of such a unique creature would be a tragedy, as it is the last link to an ancient lineage of turtles, the vanished carnivores of Africa and Asia. Africa and Asia, today known for their rich wildlife, have also lost many species over the millennia. The cave lion, a subspecies or close relative of the modern lion, was one of the largest lions ever to exist. It lived across Europe and Asia during the Ice Age, with some populations extending into Alaska. Cave lions were larger and more robust than modern lions, with males weighing over 700 pounds. They hunted large herbivores like horses, bison, and reindeer. Remarkably, cave paintings and carvings from tens of thousands of years ago depict these animals, showing that early humans lived alongside them and may have competed with them for prey. Cave lions went extinct around 14,000 years ago, likely due to the decline of their prey and competition with human hunters. The giant cheetah was another impressive predator that lived in Europe and Asia. It was about the same size as a modern lion, much larger than today's cheetahs, but it retained the slender build and long legs of its smaller relatives. This suggests it was also a fast runner, capable of chasing down prey across open plains. The giant cheetah went extinct around 20,000 years ago, possibly due to the same factors that affected other Ice Age megafauna. The Bali tiger, Javan tiger, and Caspian tiger are all subspecies of tiger that have gone extinct within the last century. The Bali tiger, which lived on the Indonesian island of Bali, was the smallest of all tiger subspecies, but it was still a formidable predator. It was hunted extensively for sport and due to fear by local people. The last Bali tiger was killed in 1937. The Javan tiger, native to the island of Java, survived longer, but was extinct by the 1980s. The Caspian tiger, which once roamed the forests and river valleys of Central Asia, was hunted to extinction in the 1970s. These losses represent not just the disappearance of individual animals, but the loss of entire lineages, each uniquely adapted to their environments. The giants of the ancient oceans. The oceans have been home to some of the largest animals ever to exist, and many ancient marine creatures dwarf even the blue whale, the largest animal alive today. Megalodon was a gigantic shark that lived from around 23 million to 3.6 million years ago. It was one of the largest and most powerful predators ever to exist, growing to lengths of over 50 feet, possibly even larger. Its teeth, which are the most commonly found fossils of this animal, could be over 7 inches long. Megalodon had a bite force estimated at over 10 tons, powerful enough to crush bone and bite through the armor of ancient whales. It fed primarily on whales, dolphins, and other large marine mammals, patrolling the oceans as an apex predator. The reasons for Megalodon's extinction are still debated, but it may have been due to cooling ocean temperatures and the decline of its prey species. The disappearance of Megalodon allowed other predators, including modern great white sharks and orcas, to rise to prominence. Basilosaurus was an early whale that lived around 40 million to 34 million years ago. Despite its name, which means king lizard, Basilosaurus was not a reptile, but a fully aquatic mammal. It was enormous, reaching lengths of over 60 feet, with a long, serpentine body. Basilosaurus had small vestigial hind legs, remnants of its terrestrial ancestors, though these legs were far too small to be of any use for walking. It was a predator, feeding on fish, sharks, and smaller whales. Basilosaurus represents an important stage in the evolution of whales, showing the transition from land-dwelling mammals to the fully aquatic giants we see today. While Basilosaurus itself is extinct, its descendants, the modern whales and dolphins, continue to thrive in the oceans. Dunkleosteus was a massive armored fish that lived during the late Devonian period, around 360 million years ago. This was long before the age of dinosaurs, in an era when fish were the dominant vertebrates in the oceans. Dunkleosteus grew to lengths of over 30 feet and had a heavily armored head made of thick, bony plates. Instead of teeth, it had sharp, bony plates in its jaws that could slice through prey with incredible force. Studies of its jaw mechanics suggest that Dunkleosteus had one of the most powerful bites of any fish, capable of crushing armored prey. It fed on other fish, including smaller placoderms and even sharks. Dunkleosteus went extinct at the end of the Devonian period, along with many other armored fish, in a mass extinction event that reshaped ocean ecosystems. The flightless birds of distant islands. Islands around the world have been home to many unique species of flightless birds, most of which have gone extinct due to human activities. These birds evolved in environments with few or no predators, and over time, they lost the ability to fly, becoming larger and more terrestrial. The giant moa of New Zealand, mentioned earlier, were the largest of these birds, but they were not the only flightless birds on the islands. New Zealand was also home to several species of kiwi-like birds, flightless ducks, and the adzebil, a large, flightless rail that had a powerful beak used for digging and crushing. Most of these birds went extinct shortly after the arrival of humans, hunted for food, or killed by introduced predators like rats and dogs. The elephant bird of Madagascar, also mentioned earlier, was the heaviest bird ever to exist. The island was also home to other flightless birds, including several species of flightless ibises and rails. These birds filled a variety of ecological niches, from seed-eaters to predators of small animals. The arrival of humans on Madagascar led to the extinction of most of these species within a few centuries. The Lord Howe swampfin was a large, flightless rail that lived on Lord Howe Island, a small island off the coast of Australia. It was brightly coloured, with blue and purple plumage, and fed on plants and small animals. The swampfin had no fear of humans and could be easily approached. When European settlers arrived in the late 1700s, they brought pigs and rats, which devastated the island's wildlife. The Lord Howe swampfin was extinct by the mid-1800s, another victim of introduced predators. The Rodriguez solitaire was a large, flightless bird related to the dodo. It lived on the island of Rodriguez in the Indian Ocean and stood about 3 feet tall. Like the dodo, it had no natural predators and was unafraid of humans. When people arrived on Rodriguez in the late 1600s, they hunted the solitaire for food and introduced animals that preyed on its eggs. The Rodriguez solitaire was extinct by the mid-1700s. We know about this bird from descriptions written by early visitors to the island and from a few fossil remains, the mammoths and mastodons of the Ice Age. While woolly mammoths are the most famous Ice Age elephants, they were not the only ones. Several other species of mammoths and related animals called mastodons also roamed the earth during this time. The Columbian mammoth lived in North America, ranging from Canada to Mexico. It was one of the largest mammoth species, standing over 13 feet tall and weighing up to 10 tons. Unlike the woolly mammoth, which lived in cold, treeless tundra, the Columbian mammoth inhabited more temperate regions, including grasslands and open woodlands. It had a less shaggy coat and smaller ears than the woolly mammoth, adaptations to a warmer climate. Columbian mammoths went extinct around 10,000 years ago, at the same time as many other large Ice Age mammals. The American mastodon was a relative of mammoths and modern elephants, but it belonged to a different lineage. Mastodons were shorter and stockier than mammoths, with long, shaggy hair and shorter legs. They had distinctive teeth with conical cusps, adapted for browsing on leaves and shrubs rather than grazing on grasses. Mastodons lived in forests and swamps across North America, often near lakes and rivers. They were more solitary than mammoths, and males in particular spent much of their time alone. Mastodons vanished around 10,000 years ago, likely due to a combination of climate change and human hunting. Their remains are commonly found in peat bogs and other wet environments, where the acidic conditions help preserve bones and sometimes even soft tissue. The steppe mammoth was an ancestor of the woolly mammoth and one of the largest elephants ever to exist. It lived in the grasslands of Europe and Asia during the early and middle Pleistocene. Some individuals stood over 15 feet tall at the shoulder, making them among the tallest mammoths. The steppe mammoth had long, spiraling tusks that could exceed 16 feet in length. As the climate cooled and ice sheets expanded, the steppe mammoth evolved into the smaller, hairier woolly mammoth, better adapted to the extreme cold of the Ice Age tundra. The ancient primates. Our own order, the primates, has seen many extinctions over the millennia. Some of these extinct primates were close relatives of modern humans, while others belonged to lineages that left no descendants. Gigantopithecus was the largest primate ever to exist. It lived in Asia from around 9 million to 100,000 years ago. Based on fossil evidence, primarily teeth and jaw bones, scientists estimate that Gigantopithecus stood over 10 feet tall when upright and weighed over 1,000 pounds. It was likely related to modern orangutans, though it spent most of its time on the ground. Gigantopithecus was a herbivore, feeding on bamboo, fruits, and other vegetation. Its massive size may have been an adaptation to a diet of tough, fibrous plants. The extinction of Gigantopithecus is thought to be due to climate change and competition with other species, including early humans. As forests shrank and bamboo became less abundant, Gigantopithecus could not adapt, and the species eventually died out. Several species of early humans have also gone extinct. Homo neanderthalensis, or Neanderthals, were close relatives of modern humans. They lived in Europe and Asia from about 400,000 to 40,000 years ago. Neanderthals were shorter and more robust than modern humans, with thick bones and powerful muscles. They had large brains, made sophisticated stone tools, used fire, and buried their dead, suggesting they had complex social structures and possibly even symbolic thought. For a time, Neanderthals coexisted with Homo sapiens, and the two species even interbred. Today, many people of European and Asian descent carry small amounts of Neanderthal DNA. The reasons for the Neanderthals' extinction are still debated. They may have been outcompeted by modern humans for resources, or they may have been absorbed into Homo sapiens populations through interbreeding. Climate change during the last ice age may also have played a role. Homo floresiensis, also known as the Hobbit, was a small species of human that lived on the island of Flores in Indonesia. Adults stood only about 3.5 feet tall and had brains about 1/3 the size of modern humans. Despite their small size, they made stone tools, hunted small elephants and giant rats, and used fire. Homo floresiensis lived until at least 50,000 years ago, and possibly even more recently. Their extinction may have been caused by volcanic eruptions, competition with modern humans who arrived on the island, or a combination of factors. The discovery of Homo floresiensis was one of the most surprising finds in paleoanthropology, showing that multiple species of humans coexisted until relatively recently, the age of reptiles in the sea. Before marine mammals like whales and dolphins dominated the oceans, reptiles ruled the waves. These ancient marine reptiles evolved from land-dwelling ancestors that returned to the sea, developing adaptations for an aquatic lifestyle. The nothosaurs were early marine reptiles that lived during the Triassic period. They were smaller than later marine reptiles, with most species growing to lengths of about 10 to 13 feet. Nothosaurs had long necks, flattened tails, and paddle-like limbs that they used to swim. They likely hunted fish and squid in shallow coastal waters. Nothosaurs were not fully aquatic and probably came ashore to rest and lay eggs, similar to modern sea turtles. They were one of the first groups of reptiles to adapt to life in the ocean, paving the way for the more specialized marine reptiles that would follow. Tanystropheus was one of the strangest reptiles of the Triassic. It had an extraordinarily long neck made up of elongated vertebrae that could be twice as long as its body and tail combined. Some species of Tanystropheus reached lengths of over 20 feet, with much of that length being neck. For many years, scientists were puzzled by this bizarre anatomy. Recent studies suggest that Tanystropheus lived in shallow coastal waters, using its long neck to strike at fish from a distance. Its neck was stiff and inflexible, more like a fishing rod than the flexible neck of a plesiosaur. Tanystropheus went extinct at the end of the Triassic, along with many other marine reptiles, in a mass extinction event, the terror birds and giant ground birds. After the extinction of the dinosaurs, some bird lineages evolved to become large, flightless predators. These birds filled the ecological niches left vacant by the carnivorous dinosaurs, becoming the top predators in their environments. The phorusrhacids, commonly known as terror birds, were among the most fearsome predators of South America. They lived from about 62 million to 2 million years ago, and some species stood over 10 feet tall. Terror birds had massive skulls with hooked beaks that could deliver devastating pecks and tear flesh. Their legs were long and powerful, allowing them to run at speeds of up to 30 miles per hour. Despite their size, they were agile hunters, capable of chasing down prey across open grasslands. Terror birds likely hunted in a manner similar to modern predatory birds, using their speed to catch prey and their beaks to kill. They went extinct around the time that large mammalian carnivores arrived in South America from North America, suggesting they may have been outcompeted. Gastornis, also known as Diatryma, was a large, flightless bird that lived in Europe and North America during the Paleocene and Eocene epochs, about 56 to 40 million years ago. It stood over 6 feet tall and had a massive beak and powerful legs. For many years, Gastornis was thought to be a predator, similar to the terror birds. However, more recent studies of its beak shape and the lack of sharp talons suggest it may have been primarily herbivorous, feeding on tough plant material like seeds and nuts. If this is true, Gastornis would have used its size and strength to defend itself from predators rather than to hunt. Gastornis went extinct as forests changed and mammals diversified, possibly due to competition for food. The ancient crocodilians. Crocodiles and their relatives have a long and diverse evolutionary history. While modern crocodilians are successful and have changed relatively little over millions of years, many extinct species were very different from those alive today. Sarcosuchus was a giant crocodile-like reptile that lived in what is now Africa during the early Cretaceous period, about 112 million years ago. It was one of the largest crocodilians ever to exist, reaching lengths of over 40 feet and weighing up to 8 tons. Sarcosuchus had a long, narrow snout, filled with over 100 teeth, which it used to catch fish and possibly dinosaurs that came to the water's edge to drink. Despite its size, Sarcosuchus was likely an ambush predator, lying in wait in rivers and lakes and striking with sudden, explosive power. It shared its environment with several species of large dinosaurs, including herbivorous sauropods. Fossils of Sarcosuchus have been found with bite marks that match the teeth of large theropod dinosaurs, suggesting that even this massive crocodile was not immune to predation. Deinosuchus was another enormous crocodilian that lived in North America during the late Cretaceous period. It could grow to lengths of over 35 feet, making it one of the largest predators of its time. Deinosuchus lived in rivers and coastal areas, and it likely hunted a variety of prey, including fish, turtles, and dinosaurs. Fossils of dinosaurs have been found with bite marks that match the teeth of Deinosuchus, and in some cases, the bones show signs of healing, suggesting the dinosaurs survived the attack. Deinosuchus went extinct at the end of the Cretaceous, along with the non-avian dinosaurs and many other species. Purosaurus was a giant caiman that lived in South America during the Miocene epoch, about 8 million years ago. It was one of the largest crocodilians ever to exist, with some estimates placing its length at over 40 feet and its weight at over 8 tons. Purosaurus had a massive skull with powerful jaws, capable of crushing the bones of large mammals. It lived in a swampy environment filled with rivers and lakes, where it would have been the apex predator. Purosaurus coexisted with giant ground sloths, glyptodonts, and early ungulates, and it likely preyed on any animal that ventured too close to the water. The extinction of Purosaurus is thought to be related to changes in climate and river systems that altered its habitat. The ancient whales. Whales are among the most successful marine mammals, but their evolutionary history includes many species that are now extinct. The ancestors of whales were land-dwelling mammals that gradually adapted to life in the ocean, losing their hind limbs and developing flippers and flukes. Ambulocetus, which means walking whale, was an early whale that lived about 50 million years ago in what is now Pakistan. It was about 12 feet long and had 4 legs with webbed feet, which it used to walk on land and swim in water. Ambulocetus had a long snout filled with sharp teeth, and it likely hunted fish and other aquatic animals. It represents an important transitional form, showing how early whales were adapting to an aquatic lifestyle while still retaining the ability to move on land. Ambulocetus probably lived in a manner similar to modern crocodiles, spending much of its time in the water but coming ashore to rest and possibly to give birth. Dorodon was a later whale that lived during the late Eocene, about 40 to 36 million years ago. It was fully aquatic, with no functional hind limbs, though it retained tiny vestigial bones buried in its body. Dorodon was about 16 feet long and had a streamlined body with flippers and a powerful tail fluke. It fed on fish and squid, and it may have used echolocation to navigate and hunt, similar to modern toothed whales. Dorodon fossils have been found in what were once shallow tropical seas, where these animals lived in large groups. Dorodon is closely related to Basilosaurus, mentioned earlier, and both are part of the group of early whales that gave rise to all modern cetaceans. The baleen whales, which include the blue whale, the largest animal ever to exist, have their own lineage of extinct species. During the Miocene epoch, some baleen whales reached sizes comparable to or even exceeding modern blue whales. These giants fed on the abundant plankton and small fish in the ancient oceans, using their baleen plates to filter vast quantities of water. The fossil record of baleen whales is incomplete, but it shows a long history of diversity and adaptation to changing ocean conditions. The lost mammals of Australia. Australia's mammalian fauna has always been unique, dominated by marsupials rather than the placental mammals that are common on other continents. Many of Australia's extinct mammals were unlike anything else in the world. Thylacoleo, the marsupial lion, was mentioned earlier, but it is worth revisiting because of its remarkable adaptations. Unlike placental carnivores, which typically have long canine teeth, Thylacoleo had large, blade-like premolars that functioned like scissors, shearing through flesh and bone. Its jaw muscles were incredibly powerful, and studies suggest it may have had the strongest bite force relative to body size of any mammal. Thylacine also had large, retractable claws on its thumbs, which it may have used to climb trees or to hold onto struggling prey. Fossils have been found in caves where these animals may have lived or stored their kills. Thylacine went extinct around 30,000 years ago, likely due to a combination of climate change and human hunting. Procoptodon was a giant, short-faced kangaroo that stood over 6 feet tall and weighed up to 500 pounds. Unlike modern kangaroos, which move by hopping on 2 legs, Procoptodon may have walked more upright, using its long arms to reach high branches. It had a short, flattened face with forward-facing eyes, giving it better depth perception than modern kangaroos. Procoptodon lived in a variety of habitats, from forests to open plains, and it fed on leaves and shrubs. It went extinct around 40,000 years ago, around the same time that humans first arrived in Australia. Zygomaturus was a large, wombat-like marsupial that lived in Australia during the Pleistocene. It was about the size of a cow, with a heavy body and short legs. Zygomaturus had large, forward-facing incisor teeth that it used to crop vegetation. It lived near rivers and swamps where it could find abundant plant food. Fossils of Zygomaturus have been found with evidence of butchery by early humans, showing that these animals were hunted for food. They went extinct around 30,000 years ago. The ancient amphibians, long before reptiles and mammals dominated the land, amphibians were the first vertebrates to successfully colonize terrestrial environments. During the Carboniferous period, about 360 to 300 million years ago, amphibians diversified into a wide range of forms, some of which were very different from modern frogs, toads, and salamanders. Prionosuchus was one of the largest amphibians ever to exist. It lived during the Permian period in what is now Brazil and grew to lengths of over 30 feet. Prionosuchus resembled a giant crocodile with a long body, short legs, and a large head filled with sharp teeth. It was fully aquatic, living in rivers and lakes where it hunted fish and other aquatic animals. Despite its size and fearsome appearance, Prionosuchus was an amphibian, not a reptile, and it likely had to keep its skin moist and may have laid eggs in water like modern amphibians. Prionosuchus went extinct in the mass extinction at the end of the Permian period. Eriops was a large amphibian that lived during the Permian period in North America. It was about 6 feet long, with a broad, flat skull and powerful limbs. Eriops spent part of its life in water and part on land, and it was well adapted to both environments. It had strong bones that could support its weight on land, but it also had a long, flattened tail for swimming. Eriops was a predator, feeding on fish, smaller amphibians, and early reptiles. Its fossils are common in certain rock formations, suggesting it was a successful and widespread animal. Eriops, like Prionosuchus, went extinct at the end of the Permian. Diplocaulus was a smaller, more unusual amphibian that lived during the Permian period. It had a distinctive, boomerang-shaped head with long, backward-pointing horns. The function of this bizarre skull shape is still debated. Some scientists think it may have helped Diplocaulus glide through the water, acting like a hydrofoil. Others suggest it may have made the animal difficult for predators to swallow. Diplocaulus was fully aquatic, with a long, slender body and small limbs. It fed on small fish and invertebrates. Like so many other Permian animals, Diplocaulus went extinct in the mass extinction event, the lost birds of North America and Europe. In addition to the passenger pigeon and Carolina parakeet, North America and Europe have lost many other bird species in recent centuries. The great auk, mentioned earlier, was not the only flightless seabird to go extinct. The spectacled cormorant was a large, flightless cormorant that lived on the Commander Islands in the Bering Sea. It was discovered by Europeans in 1741 during the same expedition that discovered the Steller's sea cow. The spectacled cormorant was hunted for food by shipwrecked sailors and later by hunters who visited the islands. It was large, slow, and unafraid of humans, making it an easy target. Within less than a century of its discovery, the spectacled cormorant was extinct. The last individuals were killed in the mid-1800s. The Labrador duck was a sea duck that lived along the northeastern coast of North America. It was small, with striking black and white plumage in males. Labrador ducks fed on mollusks and other small marine animals. They were never abundant, and their exact habitat and breeding grounds remain a mystery. The Labrador duck went extinct in the late 1800s, likely due to a combination of hunting, egg collection, and habitat loss. The last confirmed individual was shot in 1878. Only a few dozen specimens exist in museums, making the Labrador duck one of the rarest and most poorly understood extinct birds. The heath hen was a subspecies of the greater prairie chicken that lived in the coastal heathlands of New England. It was once common, but habitat destruction and overhunting caused its numbers to decline rapidly in the 1800s. By the early 1900s, only a small population remained on the island of Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. Conservation efforts were made to protect the birds, but a series of disasters, including a fire, a harsh winter, and an outbreak of disease, reduced the population to just a few individuals. The last heath hen, a male named Booming Ben, died in 1932. His calls were recorded, providing a haunting reminder of a species that once filled the skies. The extinction of the Pleistocene megafauna. The end of the Pleistocene epoch, around 11,700 years ago, marked one of the most significant extinction events in recent geological history. Across the world, large mammals, often referred to as megafauna, disappeared in a relatively short period of time. The causes of these extinctions have been debated for decades, with two main hypotheses: climate change and human hunting. The climate change hypothesis argues that the warming temperatures at the end of the Ice Age dramatically altered habitats. As ice sheets retreated and forests expanded, the open grasslands that many megafauna depended on shrank. Animals like mammoths, which were adapted to cold, treeless tundra, may have struggled to find suitable food and habitat. However, these animals had survived previous warming periods during earlier interglacial phases, which raises questions about why this particular warming event was so deadly. The human hunting hypothesis, also known as the overkill hypothesis, suggests that the arrival of human hunters tipped the balance for many species. Humans with advanced hunting tools and strategies spread across the world during the late Pleistocene, reaching the Americas, Australia, and remote islands. These humans encountered animals that had never seen human predators and had no instinctive fear of them. Even low levels of hunting could have driven populations into decline, especially for large animals that reproduce slowly. Evidence of human hunting comes from archaeological sites where bones of extinct animals are found with butchery marks or in association with human tools. Most scientists now believe that the truth lies somewhere in between. Climate change may have stressed megafauna populations, making them more vulnerable, and human hunting delivered the final blow. The combination of these two factors proved too much for many species. The extinctions were not uniform across the world. In Africa, where humans and large mammals evolved together, fewer species went extinct. In the Americas and Australia, where humans arrived relatively suddenly, the extinctions were more severe. This pattern suggests that human impact played a significant role. The survivors and the future. Not all stories of extinction are tales of complete loss. Some animals have come back from the brink, offering hope for the future. The recovery of species like the American bison, California condor, and black-footed ferret shows that with effort, dedication, and resources, extinction can sometimes be prevented. The Arabian oryx is another success story. This beautiful antelope, with its long, straight horns and white coat, lived in the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula. By the 1960s, hunting and habitat loss had driven it to extinction in the wild. The last wild Arabian oryx was shot in 1972. However, a few individuals survived in captivity, in zoos and private collections. An international breeding program was established, and in 1982, Arabian oryx were reintroduced to the wild in Oman. Today, there are over 1,000 Arabian oryx in the wild, and the species has been downgraded from extinct in the wild to vulnerable. It is the only animal ever to have been brought back from extinction in the wild through captive breeding. The black robin of New Zealand is another remarkable example. In 1980, only 5 black robins remained, all on a single small island. The species seemed doomed, but conservationists took extraordinary measures, including cross-fostering eggs to other bird species and carefully managing every individual. Through decades of effort, the black robin population has recovered to over 250 individuals. While the species remains endangered, it is no longer on the immediate brink of extinction. The kakapo, a large, flightless parrot from New Zealand, is also making a slow recovery. In the 1990s, fewer than 50 kakapo remained, threatened by introduced predators like rats, stoats, and cats. An intensive conservation program was launched, with every surviving bird monitored and protected. Today, there are over 200 kakapo, each one individually known and cared for. The kakapo recovery program is one of the most intensive conservation efforts in the world, and while the species is still critically endangered, its future is brighter than it was decades ago. These success stories show that extinction is not inevitable. With knowledge, commitment, and resources, we can save species from disappearing, but they also remind us of the cost. Conservation is expensive, time-consuming, and often requires decades of sustained effort. It is far easier to prevent extinctions in the first place by protecting habitats, controlling invasive species, and addressing the root causes of biodiversity loss. The lessons of extinction. The stories of extinct animals teach us many lessons. They remind us of the impermanence of life and the fragility of ecosystems. They show us how quickly a species can vanish when conditions change, whether through natural disasters, climate shifts, or human actions. But they also reveal the resilience of life. After every mass extinction, new species have evolved to fill the empty niches, and life has continued, albeit in different forms. One of the most important lessons is the role of biodiversity in maintaining healthy ecosystems. Each species, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, plays a role in the web of life. When a species goes extinct, it can have ripple effects throughout its ecosystem. Predators lose their prey, plants lose their pollinators, and habitats change in unpredictable ways. The loss of biodiversity makes ecosystems less resilient and less able to adapt to change. Another lesson is the power of human actions, both to harm and to help. Humans have driven many species to extinction, but we also have the ability to prevent extinctions and to restore damaged ecosystems. The choices we make today will determine which species survive and which disappear. Will we protect the remaining habitats of endangered animals, or will we allow them to be destroyed for short-term gain? Will we address the threats of climate change, pollution, and overexploitation, or will we leave future generations with a diminished and impoverished world? The extinct animals of the past are more than just fossils and stories. They are reminders of what we stand to lose if we do not act. They are also sources of wonder, inspiring us to appreciate the diversity and beauty of life on Earth. Every extinct animal was once a living, breathing creature, part of a family, part of an ecosystem, part of the great web of life. Their loss is permanent, but their memory can inspire us to do better. The mystery of de-extinction. In recent years, advances in genetics have raised the possibility of bringing extinct species back to life through a process called de-extinction. Scientists have proposed using DNA from preserved specimens to recreate animals like the woolly mammoth, the passenger pigeon, and the thylacine. The idea is both thrilling and controversial. The most common approach to de-extinction involves using preserved genetic material to insert genes from the extinct species into the DNA of a closely related living species. For example, scientists could insert mammoth genes into the DNA of Asian elephants, creating a hybrid animal that resembles a mammoth. Similarly, passenger pigeon genes could be inserted into the DNA of band-tailed pigeons. Another approach involves cloning, using intact DNA from well-preserved specimens to create an embryo, though this is only possible for very recently extinct species, where high-quality DNA still exists. Proponents of de-extinction argue that it could help restore lost biodiversity, repair damaged ecosystems, and even undo some of the harm humans have caused. Mammoths, for example, could potentially help restore the grassland ecosystems of the Arctic tundra by knocking down trees and fertilizing the soil. Passenger pigeons could help disperse seeds in North American forests. De-extinction could also provide valuable insights into genetics, development, and evolution. Critics, however, raise many concerns. De-extinction is expensive and technically challenging, and the resources required could be better spent on protecting endangered species that still exist. Even if scientists succeed in creating an animal that resembles an extinct species, it would not be a perfect recreation. It would be a hybrid, with genes from both the extinct species and its living relative. Moreover, the world has changed since these animals went extinct. The habitats they once lived in may no longer exist, and reintroducing them could have unpredictable consequences. There are also ethical questions. Do we have the right to bring back species that nature or humanity has eliminated? What are our responsibilities to these recreated animals? As of now, de-extinction remains largely theoretical. A few small-scale experiments have been conducted, but no extinct animal has been successfully brought back. Whether de-extinction will ever become a reality, and whether it should, are questions that science and society are still grappling with. The role of museums and fossils. Museums play a crucial role in preserving the memory of extinct animals. Fossils, skeletons, preserved specimens, and even DNA samples are housed in collections around the world, providing invaluable resources for scientists. These collections allow researchers to study extinct animals in detail, learning about their anatomy, behavior, and evolution. They also serve as a record of life's history on Earth, documenting the incredible diversity that has existed over millions of years. Fossils are often all that remains of extinct animals. They are formed when the remains of an animal are buried in sediment, which gradually hardens into rock over millions of years. The hard parts of the animal, such as bones, teeth, and shells, are most likely to be preserved. Soft tissues, like muscles and organs, rarely fossilize, but in exceptional cases even these can be preserved. Fossils from the Burgess Shale in Canada, for example, show exquisite details of soft-bodied animals from over 500 million years ago. Paleontologists study fossils to reconstruct the appearance and behavior of extinct animals. They examine the shape of bones to determine how an animal moved, the structure of teeth to understand what it ate, and the size of brain cases to estimate intelligence. By comparing fossils from different time periods and locations, scientists can trace the evolution of species and understand how they adapted to changing environments. Fossils also provide evidence of mass extinctions, showing which species disappeared and which survived. In recent decades, technology has revolutionized the study of fossils. CT scans and 3D imaging allow scientists to examine the internal structure of fossils without damaging them. Isotope analysis can reveal information about an animal's diet and the climate it lived in. And advances in DNA extraction and analysis have made it possible to obtain genetic information from fossils that are tens of thousands of years old, providing direct evidence of evolutionary relationships. Museums also serve an educational role, bringing the stories of extinct animals to the public. Exhibits featuring dinosaur skeletons, Ice Age mammals, and more recent extinctions inspire wonder and curiosity in visitors of all ages. They remind us of the incredible diversity of life that has existed on Earth and the importance of preserving the species that remain. The ancient arthropods. While vertebrates often steal the spotlight, some of the most fascinating extinct animals were invertebrates. Arthropods, the group that includes insects, spiders, and crustaceans, have an incredibly long and diverse evolutionary history, with many extinct forms that were very different from anything alive today. Trilobites were among the most successful and diverse groups of animals in the ancient oceans. They first appeared over 520 million years ago, during the Cambrian period, and thrived for nearly 300 million years before going extinct at the end of the Permian. Trilobites had segmented bodies covered in a hard exoskeleton, with a distinctive three-lobed structure that gives them their name. They ranged in size from less than a millimeter to over 2 feet long. Trilobites occupied a wide range of ecological niches. Some crawled along the seafloor, scavenging or hunting for food. Others burrowed in sediment or swam in open water. Trilobites had complex eyes, some of the earliest eyes in the animal kingdom, made of calcite crystals that allowed them to see clearly underwater. Their fossils are extremely common in certain rock formations, and they are often used by geologists to date rocks and reconstruct ancient environments. The extinction of trilobites at the end of the Permian marked the end of an incredibly successful lineage. Anomalocaris was a fearsome predator of the Cambrian seas. Growing up to 3 feet long, it was one of the largest animals of its time. Anomalocaris had a segmented body with lateral lobes that it used for swimming and a circular mouth ringed with plates that could close like a camera aperture. It had large, compound eyes on stalks and 2 large spiny appendages at the front of its body that it used to grasp prey. For many years, scientists did not realize that Anomalocaris was a single animal. Its various body parts were found separately and were thought to belong to different species. Once the full animal was reconstructed, it became clear that Anomalocaris was an apex predator, hunting trilobites and other animals in the ancient oceans. Anomalocaris and its relatives went extinct at the end of the Cambrian, but they represent an important early stage in the evolution of arthropods. Arthropleura was a giant millipede that lived during the Carboniferous period, around 340 to 280 million years ago. It was one of the largest land arthropods ever to exist, reaching lengths of over 8 feet. Arthropleura had a segmented body with dozens of pairs of legs, similar to modern millipedes, but it was far larger. It lived in the vast coal swamps that covered much of the world during the Carboniferous, feeding on decaying plant matter and perhaps fungi. The high oxygen levels in the atmosphere during this time may have allowed arthropods like Arthropleura to grow to such enormous sizes. Arthropleura went extinct at the end of the Carboniferous as the climate dried and the coal swamps disappeared. Meganeura was a giant dragonfly relative that lived during the Carboniferous period. It had a wingspan of over 2 feet, making it one of the largest flying insects ever to exist. Like modern dragonflies, Meganeura was a predator, hunting other insects in the air. Its large size was likely made possible by the high oxygen levels in the Carboniferous atmosphere, which allowed insects to grow much larger than they can today. Meganeura had large compound eyes and powerful jaws, and it would have been a formidable hunter. It went extinct at the end of the Carboniferous, along with many other giant arthropods, as oxygen levels declined. The ammonites and ancient cephalopods, cephalopods, the group that includes octopuses, squids, and nautiluses, have a long and fascinating evolutionary history. One of the most successful and diverse groups of extinct cephalopods were the ammonites. Ammonites were marine mollusks that lived from the Devonian period to the end of the Cretaceous, a span of over 350 million years. They had coiled shells divided into chambers, with the animal living in the outermost chamber. As an ammonite grew, it would add new chambers to its shell, moving forward and sealing off the old chambers behind it. These chambers were filled with gas, which helped the ammonite control its buoyancy and move through the water. Ammonites ranged in size from less than an inch to over 6 feet in diameter. They were carnivores, feeding on fish, crustaceans, and other small animals. Ammonites were incredibly diverse, with thousands of species described, and they are among the most common fossils in marine rocks from the Mesozoic era. Like the dinosaurs, ammonites went extinct at the end of the Cretaceous, victims of the same asteroid impact. Orthoceras was an ancient cephalopod that lived during the Ordovician and Triassic periods. Unlike the coiled shells of ammonites, Orthoceras had a long, straight, cone-shaped shell. It could grow to lengths of over 10 feet. Orthoceras lived in the open ocean, using jet propulsion to move through the water. It would expel water from its body cavity to push itself forward, similar to how modern squids swim. Orthoceras was a predator, using its tentacles to capture prey. Its fossils are commonly found in limestone and other marine rocks, and polished sections of Orthoceras shells are often used in jewelry and decorative objects. The changing climate and mass extinctions. Throughout Earth's history, climate change has been a major driver of extinction. The planet has experienced periods of extreme warmth and extreme cold, and these shifts have had profound effects on life. The mass extinction at the end of the Permian, mentioned earlier, was triggered by massive volcanic eruptions that dramatically altered the climate. The extinction at the end of the Cretaceous was caused by an asteroid impact, but climate change played a role in the aftermath, as debris in the atmosphere blocked sunlight and caused temperatures to plummet. Today, we are living through another period of rapid climate change, but this time, the cause is human activity. The burning of fossil fuels has released vast quantities of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, trapping heat and causing global temperatures to rise. This warming is happening faster than at almost any time in Earth's history, and many species are struggling to adapt. Habitats are shifting, ice caps are melting, and sea levels are rising. Coral reefs, which are among the most biodiverse ecosystems on Earth, are bleaching and dying as ocean temperatures increase. Many species are being pushed toward extinction, and some scientists warn that we are in the early stages of a 6th mass extinction. this time caused by human actions. The difference between past mass extinctions and the current crisis is that we have the knowledge and the ability to prevent it. We understand the causes of climate change, and we have the technology to reduce our carbon emissions and protect ecosystems. The question is whether we have the will to act. The extinctions of the past remind us of the fragility of life and the consequences of inaction. They also remind us that life is resilient and adaptable, capable of recovering from even the most catastrophic events, given time. But recovery takes millions of years, and the species lost are gone forever. The interconnected web of life. One of the most important lessons from the study of extinction is that all life is interconnected. The loss of one species can have cascading effects throughout an ecosystem. When the dodo went extinct, several plant species on Mauritius that depended on the dodo to disperse their seeds also declined. When large predators like the thylacine disappear, populations of their prey can explode, leading to overgrazing and habitat degradation. When coral reefs die, the thousands of species that depend on them for food and shelter are also threatened. This interconnectedness means that conservation efforts cannot focus on individual species in isolation. To save a species, we must protect its habitat and the other species it interacts with. We must address the threats of habitat loss, pollution, climate change, and invasive species. We must recognize that the health of ecosystems is directly tied to human health and well-being. Healthy ecosystems provide clean air and water, pollinate our crops, regulate the climate, and offer countless other benefits. The concept of keystone species illustrates this interconnectedness. A keystone species is one that has a disproportionately large effect on its ecosystem relative to its abundance. The loss of a keystone species can lead to dramatic changes in the ecosystem. Sea otters, for example, are a keystone species in kelp forest ecosystems. They feed on sea urchins, which in turn feed on kelp. When sea otters are present, they keep sea urchin populations in check, allowing kelp forests to thrive. When sea otters are removed, sea urchin populations explode, and they overgraze the kelp, turning vibrant forests into barren underwater deserts. Wolves play a similar role in some terrestrial ecosystems, controlling populations of deer and elk and allowing vegetation to recover. The human connection to extinct animals. Humans have always had a complex relationship with the animals around us. We have hunted them for food, admired them for their beauty, feared them for their power, and woven them into our myths and stories. Many extinct animals played important roles in the cultures of the people who lived alongside them. The woolly mammoth was depicted in cave paintings by Ice Age humans, who may have seen these giant animals as symbols of strength and endurance. The great auk was hunted by coastal peoples for thousands of years, providing food and materials. The passenger pigeon was so abundant that it was a staple food for many Native American tribes and early European settlers. The extinction of these animals has left a void not just in ecosystems, but in human culture as well. We have lost the opportunity to experience these creatures firsthand, to watch a mammoth graze on the tundra, or to see flocks of passenger pigeons darken the sky. We have lost the knowledge that indigenous peoples had about these animals, knowledge that was passed down through generations and is now gone forever. The stories and myths surrounding extinct animals persist, but they are fading memories, disconnected from the living reality they once described. Yet, the memory of extinct animals can also inspire us. They remind us of the incredible diversity of life on Earth and the wonders that exist all around us. They challenge us to appreciate the animals we still have and to work to protect them. They teach us humility, showing us that no species, not even our own, is guaranteed to survive forever. And they offer us hope. demonstrating that when humans choose to act, we can make a difference. The future of biodiversity. The future of biodiversity is uncertain. We are living in a time of rapid change, and the choices we make in the coming decades will determine the fate of countless species. Some scientists are optimistic, pointing to the growing awareness of environmental issues and the increasing efforts to protect endangered species and ecosystems. International agreements, like the Convention on Biological Diversity and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, represent steps in the right direction. Protected areas are being established, and conservation programs are saving species from the brink of extinction. Other scientists are more pessimistic, noting that biodiversity loss continues at an alarming rate. Habitats are still being destroyed, pollution is worsening, and climate change is accelerating. Many species are declining faster than conservation efforts can save them. The challenges are enormous, and the political and economic will to address them is often lacking. But even in the face of these challenges, there are reasons for hope. Grassroots movements around the world are working to protect local ecosystems and species. Indigenous peoples, who have managed their lands sustainably for thousands of years, are being recognized as key partners in conservation. New technologies, from remote sensing to genetic analysis, are providing powerful tools for understanding and protecting biodiversity. And a growing number of people, especially young people, are demanding action and holding governments and corporations accountable. The story of life on Earth is one of resilience and adaptation. Life has survived 5 major mass extinctions and countless smaller ones. It has adapted to ice ages and hothouse climates, to asteroid impacts and volcanic eruptions. Life is tenacious, creative, and endlessly diverse. But the pace of change today is unprecedented, and the question is whether life, including our own species, can adapt quickly enough. Reflections on loss and memory. To think about extinct animals is to think about loss. It is to mourn the passing of creatures that once filled the world with their presence. The woolly mammoth, the dodo, the passenger pigeon, the thylacine. Each of these animals was unique, the product of millions of years of evolution, perfectly adapted to its environment. Their extinction represents a loss not just of individuals or populations, but of entire lineages, of genetic diversity that can never be recovered. But to think about extinct animals is also to think about memory. As long as we remember these creatures, as long as we tell their stories and study their remains, they are not entirely gone. They live on in our museums and our books, in our art and our imagination. They remind us of the world as it once was, and of the responsibility we have to the world as it is now. The fossils of dinosaurs inspire awe and wonder in children, sparking a lifelong interest in science and nature. The story of the dodo teaches us about the consequences of carelessness and greed. The recovery of the bison shows us the power of determination and compassion. Each extinct animal has something to teach us, if we are willing to listen. As we face the challenges of the 21st century, the memory of extinct animals can guide us. They show us what is at stake, what we stand to lose if we do not act. But they also show us the beauty and resilience of life, the incredible journey that has brought us to this moment. We are part of that journey, part of the same web of life that connects every living thing. What we do matters, not just for ourselves, but for all the species with which we share this planet. The quiet wisdom of the earth. There is a quiet wisdom in the story of life on Earth. It is a story written in stone and bone, in the layers of rock that record billions of years of history. It is a story of beginnings and endings, of species that rose and fell, of ecosystems that flourished and collapsed. It is a story of change, constant and inevitable, sometimes slow and gradual, sometimes sudden and catastrophic. The extinct animals we have explored tonight are chapters in that story. They remind us that nothing lasts forever, that all life is temporary, but they also remind us that life itself is enduring. After every extinction, new species evolve to fill the empty niches. After every catastrophe, life finds a way to rebuild. The story of life is one of loss and renewal, of death and rebirth. As you lie here, letting these stories wash over you, imagine the vastness of time. Imagine the hundreds of millions of years that dinosaurs walked the earth, the thousands of generations of mammoths that endured the Ice Age, the countless passenger pigeons that once filled the skies. Imagine the world as it was before humans, when the land and sea were filled with creatures we can barely comprehend. And imagine the world as it could be, if we choose to protect the species that remain, if we choose to preserve the incredible diversity of life that still surrounds us. Closing thoughts. The night grows late, and the stories of extinct animals begin to fade into the background, like echoes from a distant past. These creatures are gone, but their legacy remains. They are part of the history of our planet, part of the story of life itself. They remind us of where we have come from and challenge us to think about where we are going. As you rest here, let the weight of these stories settle gently around you. Let them remind you of the fragility and beauty of life, of the connections that bind all living things together. Let them inspire you to appreciate the world around you, to cherish the animals that still share this planet with us, and to work, in whatever way you can, to protect them. The woolly mammoth no longer roams the frozen tundra. The passenger pigeon no longer darkens the skies. The dodo no longer waddles through the forests of Mauritius. But in our memories, in our museums, and in the lessons they teach us, these animals are not entirely gone. They are part of us, part of our collective human story, part of the great tapestry of life on Earth. And so, as the stories come to an end, let yourself drift into sleep. Let the images of these ancient and vanished creatures carry you gently into dreams. Imagine a world filled with giants, with birds that could not fly, with cats with teeth like sabers, with armored fish and flying reptiles. Imagine the vast span of time, the slow march of evolution, the endless creativity of life. Rest now and know that every living thing is precious, every species a miracle, every moment an opportunity. The story of life continues, and we are all part of it. Sleep well, and dream of the creatures that once walked this earth, their footsteps echoing through eternity, their stories a gift to all who take the time to listen. If you happen to still be awake, you can go ahead and watch the next video when you are ready. But if your eyes are growing heavy, let the quiet of these ancient stories hold you and carry you softly into rest. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and drift into sleep, into stillness, into the vast and timeless silence where all stories, past and future, ultimately reside. Good night.